Before his heart stopped, he whispered just one name. Not his wife of 30 years, not his children who stood crying at his bedside, not the daughter who flew across the country to say goodbye. Just one name. A name that made everyone in that hospital room freeze. A name that would shatter everything they thought they knew about the man lying in that bed. A name that would expose secrets buried for decades. The machines were beeping slower now. The doctor had already told them there was nothing more they could do. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about your wealth, your legacy, or the empire you built from nothing. Richard Ashford had 2 hours left, maybe 3 if he was lucky. But luck had abandoned him months ago. His wife Catherine stood closest to the bed, her perfectly manicured hand gripping his. Even now, even in this moment, she looked composed. 30 years of high society events had taught her how to wear a mask better than anyone. Her cream-colored Chanel suit was immaculate, not a hair out of place. But if you looked close enough, if you really paid attention, you could see the tiny tremor in her jaw, the way her eyes darted to the clock every few seconds, as if counting down the minutes until her performance would finally be over. Their son, Marcus, stood by the window, unable to look at his father. He had always been the golden child. Harvard-educated, heir to a fortune that spanned real estate, tech investments, and more offshore accounts than the IRS could ever track. At 42, he had everything a man could want, except the one thing he needed most: his father's respect. That had always belonged to someone else. And then there was Emma, the youngest. 28, and still trying to figure out who she was outside of being Richard Ashford's daughter. She had flown in from Seattle, where she had been running a small non-profit, deliberately choosing a life as far from her family's wealth as possible. She held her father's other hand, tears streaming down her face without shame, without trying to hide them. Of everyone in that room, she was the only one who seemed genuinely broken. The nurse checked the IV one more time, her movements gentle but practiced. She had seen this scene play out 1,000 times. Families gathered around deathbeds, saying things they should have said years ago, or saying nothing at all because the silence had grown too thick to cut through. Richard's breathing was labored now. Each inhale sounded like it might be his last. His eyes, once sharp enough to spot a bad investment from across a boardroom, were cloudy and unfocused. But then, something changed. His fingers twitched, his lips moved. Catherine leaned in closer, her ear near his mouth. Everyone held their breath. This was it. The final words. The last wisdom from a man who had built an empire. Maybe he would tell them where he hid that final will, the one his lawyers whispered about but could never find. Maybe he would finally say he loved them, something he had been too proud or too damaged to say while he still had strength. His voice came out as barely a whisper, rough and broken. But in the silence of that room, everyone heard it clearly. One name. Just one. Sarah. The name hung in the air like smoke. Catherine's hand went slack. Marcus turned from the window, his face suddenly alert, suddenly afraid. Emma looked confused, searching her memory for anyone named Sarah in their family, in their circle, in their past. But there was no Sarah. There had never been a Sarah. Not in 30 years of marriage, not in any family photo, not in any Christmas card or charity gala or business dinner. Catherine stepped back from the bed as if she had been struck. Her composure, that carefully constructed mask, cracked just enough for something raw and terrifying to show through. She knew something. You could see it in the way her hands balled into fists, in the way her breathing changed. "Who is Sarah?" Emma asked, her voice small and afraid of the answer. No one responded. Richard's eyes closed. The beeping of the machines began to slow even more. He had maybe minutes left now, but he had said what he needed to say. That one name. That secret he had carried to the very edge of death. Marcus moved toward the bed now, his businessman instincts taking over. Dad, who is Sarah? What are you talking about?" His voice was sharp, demanding. He needed answers. This wasn't just about sentiment anymore. This was about the will, about the fortune, about who would inherit what. And if there was a Sarah somewhere, if there was someone they didn't know about, everything could change. But Richard didn't answer. His chest rose and fell one more time, then stopped. The machines let out that long, steady tone that means it's over. The nurse moved quickly, checking his pulse, checking his eyes, but everyone in the room already knew. He was gone. And with him, he had taken the answer to the question that would haunt all of them. Who was Sarah? But if you think this was the end, you're wrong. The funeral was exactly what you would expect for a man like Richard Ashford. Hundreds of people in black. Politicians, CEOs, old money mixing with new money, all of them gathered under grey skies to pay respects to a titan of industry. The cathedral was packed, every pew filled with people who claimed they knew him, who said he was a mentor, a visionary, a friend. But none of them really knew him at all. Catherine played her role perfectly, the grieving widow in vintage Dior, a black veil covering just enough of her face to hide whatever truth lived behind her eyes. She shook hands, accepted condolences, smiled that sad, dignified smile that wealthy widows have perfected over centuries. To the outside world, she was the picture of grace under pressure. But those who knew her well, those who had spent decades in the same social circles, noticed something different, something cold. The way she held herself a little too stiff, the way she barely looked at the casket, the way she flinched, just slightly, when the priest said Richard's name. Marcus delivered the eulogy. He spoke about his father's business achievements, his philanthropy, his work ethic. He told stories about boardroom victories and strategic brilliance. What he didn't talk about was love. He didn't talk about family dinners or childhood memories, or the kind of father Richard had been behind closed doors, because there wasn't much to say about that. Richard Ashford had been better at building companies than building relationships. Emma sat in the front row and cried through the entire service. She was the only one who did. She had always been too sensitive, too emotional, too much like the mother Richard had lost when he was young. Maybe that's why he could never look at her without pain in his eyes. Maybe that's why he had kept her at a distance her whole life, even when she desperately wanted him to let her in. After the burial, there was a reception at the Ashford estate. The house was a monument to wealth. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Servers in crisp white uniforms moved through rooms carrying champagne and hors d'oeuvres, because even in grief, appearances had to be maintained. Catherine disappeared upstairs shortly after the guests began to arrive. Marcus took over hosting duties, his corporate smile firmly in place. Emma found herself cornered by distant relatives she barely knew, all of them curious about the will, about what she would inherit, about whether she planned to take her place in the family business now that Richard was gone. She excused herself and slipped away to her father's study. It was the one room in the house that still felt like him. Dark wood panels, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that had witnessed decades of decisions, both brilliant and brutal. She stood in the doorway, breathing in the faint smell of his cologne that still lingered in the air. That's when she saw it. The drawer. The bottom right drawer of his desk, slightly open. Her father had been obsessive about order, about control. He would never leave a drawer open. Someone had been looking through his things. Emma glanced back toward the hallway. The sound of conversation and clinking glasses drifted up from downstairs. No one was watching. She crossed the room and pulled the drawer open fully. Inside were files, financial documents, property deeds. Nothing unusual for a man like her father. But underneath everything, tucked into the back corner, was a small leather journal. The kind people use for private thoughts, for secrets they don't want anyone else to know. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She shouldn't read it. She knew that. This was private. But that name, Sarah, had been eating away at her for 3 days. Who was she? Why had that been his last word? She opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was her father's, but younger, less steady. The date at the top made her stomach drop. 32 years ago. 2 years before he married Catherine. The entry was short, just a few lines. But those lines changed everything. Met her today. Coffee shop on 5th. She was reading Tolstoy and laughing at something in the margins. I've never believed in love at first sight. I've always thought it was something weak people invented to excuse poor decisions. But when she looked up at me, I understood. God help me, I understood. Emma flipped through more pages, entry after entry about Sarah, about how she made him feel, about how she was different from anyone he had ever met, about how she didn't care about his money or his ambitions. She wanted him, just him, the broken kid from Brooklyn who had fought his way into rooms where people like him weren't supposed to exist. Then the entries changed. The tone shifted. Fear crept into the words. She told me today, 3 months. I should be happy. I should be celebrating. But all I can think about is how this ruins everything. My father's company is failing. The board is looking for any excuse to push me out. If I marry her now, if I choose love over strategy, I lose everything I've worked for. Catherine's family can save us. Their investment, their connections. It's the smart play, the only play. But it means losing Sarah. It means losing the only real thing I've ever had. Emma's heart was pounding now. She flipped faster, scanning for answers, for what happened next. I told her today, saw her face break in real time. She didn't cry, didn't scream. Just looked at me like I was someone she used to know. Someone who died. She asked if I loved her. I said yes. She asked if I was still going to marry Catherine. I said yes. She told me I was a coward. She was right. The next entry was dated 3 weeks later. She's gone, left the city, left everything. I hired someone to find her, to make sure she was okay. He reported back today. She's in Boston, living with her sister. She won't see me, won't take my calls. I deserve that. I deserve worse. Catherine and I get married next month, merger of 2 dynasties. Business pages are calling it the wedding of the year. They have no idea what it cost. Emma felt sick. Her father, the man she thought she knew, had abandoned someone he loved, had chosen money and power over the woman who carried his child, because that's what 3 months meant. Sarah had been pregnant. She flipped to the last entry in the journal. It was dated just 6 months ago, right after his diagnosis. Dying changes things, makes you see clearly what you spent a lifetime avoiding. I built everything I thought mattered, money, power, respect, but I destroyed the only thing that actually did. I tried to find her last week, hired the best investigators. They found a death certificate. Sarah died in a car accident 23 years ago, and there's no record of a child, no birth certificate, no adoption papers, nothing. Either she lost the baby, or she made sure I could never find them. I don't blame her. I hope wherever she is, she's found peace. I know I never will. Emma closed the journal, her mind racing. Her father had another child. Somewhere out there, she had a sibling she never knew about. Someone who could be anywhere. Someone who might not even know Richard Ashford was their father. Or someone who knew exactly who he was and wanted nothing to do with him. The door to the study opened. Emma jumped, shoving the journal behind her back. Catherine stood in the doorway, still in her funeral dress, but the veil was gone now. Her face was hard, unreadable. "What are you doing in here?" Her voice was ice. "I just needed a moment. Away from everyone." Emma's voice sounded guilty even to her own ears. Catherine's eyes dropped to Emma's hands, to the way she held something behind her back. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Fear. And then something worse. Anger. "Put it back." It wasn't a request. "You knew." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "You knew about Sarah. You knew about the baby." Catherine stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more honest than Emma had ever heard it. "Your father thought he was so careful, thought he hid his past so well, but I've always known. I knew before I married him." Emma stared at her stepmother, the journal still clutched in her hands. The woman she had known her entire life suddenly felt like a stranger. Catherine crossed the room slowly, deliberately, like a predator that had finally cornered its prey. "You knew," Emma repeated, her voice stronger now, anger mixing with disbelief. "You knew he loved someone else. You knew there was a child, and you married him anyway?" Catherine's laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "Oh, sweet Emma, always so naive, always thinking the world runs on love and fairy tales. She poured herself a glass of scotch from Richard's bar cart, the expensive kind he reserved for his most important meetings. I didn't marry your father despite Sarah. I married him because of her. The words made no sense. Emma shook her head, trying to understand. What are you talking about? Your father was weak when I met him, broken, mourning a woman who had already left him, carrying a child he would never know. He was vulnerable, malleable. My family needed his business connections. He needed our money. But more than that, he needed someone to make him forget, and I was very good at making people forget. Catherine took a long sip of the scotch, her eyes distant, remembering. I gave him 30 years, 3 decades of standing by his side, playing the perfect wife, building his empire alongside him. I attended every charity gala, every business dinner, every tedious function where old men talked about portfolios and tax shelters. I gave him 2 children. I gave him respectability. I gave him everything. Except love, Emma said quietly. Love. Catherine spat the word like poison. Love is what weak people use to excuse their failures. Your father loved Sarah, and what did it get him? Regret. Pain. A lifetime of wondering what if. I gave him something much more valuable. I gave him success, power, a legacy that will outlast all of us. Emma felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of this woman. Not now. Did he ever love you, even a little? For just a moment, something flickered across Catherine's face, something human, something that looked almost like pain, but it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by that perfect mask she wore so well. He respected me. He depended on me. That was enough. She set down her glass with a sharp click against the wood. Now give me that journal. No. Emma held it tighter. There's a child out there. My father's child. They deserve to know. They deserve nothing. Catherine's voice turned hard as steel. That child, if they even exist, is a ghost, a mistake your father made 32 years ago. They have no claim to this family, to this fortune, to anything we've built. That's not your decision to make. Oh, but it is. Catherine stepped closer, her presence suddenly threatening in a way Emma had never experienced before. Your father's will is very clear. Everything goes to his legitimate children. Marcus and you, the lawyers have already reviewed it. There's no mention of any other heirs, no provisions for secrets from the past. Emma's mind was racing. What if they contest it? What if they find out and come forward? With what proof? Catherine gestured to the journal. A diary full of the ramblings of a dying man? There's no birth certificate, no DNA test, no legal documentation. The investigators your father hired found nothing. Sarah made sure of that. She protected her child from this world, from this family. And maybe that was the kindest thing anyone ever did. The words hit Emma like a physical blow, because there was truth in them. Cruel, terrible truth. She looked down at the journal in her hands, her father's confession, his regret, his last desperate attempt to find the child he had abandoned. He said her name, Emma whispered, with his last breath. He didn't say your name, Catherine. He didn't say Marcus or mine. He said Sarah. After 30 years of marriage, after everything you gave him, that's who he wanted in his final moment. The mask cracked. Just for a second. Catherine's hand trembled as she reached for her glass again. When she spoke, her voice was raw, stripped of its usual polish. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I haven't lived with that knowledge every single day of my marriage? I knew I was second choice. I knew there was a ghost in our bed, in every room of this house, in every moment we shared, but I stayed. I played my role. I earned my place in this family. That's not love, Emma said. That's a transaction. That's marriage, darling. At least in our world. Your little non-profit friends in Seattle might believe in soulmates and happily ever after, but here, in the real world, marriage is a contract, a partnership. I held up my end of the bargain. I will not let some phantom from the past destroy what I've built. Emma looked at this woman, really looked at her and saw something she had never noticed before. Catherine wasn't just cold. She was terrified. Terrified that everything she had sacrificed, every year she had spent playing a role, would be revealed as meaningless, that she would be exposed as the runner-up in her own marriage. "What are you so afraid of?" Emma asked softly. Catherine's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of anything." "Yes, you are. You're afraid that if we find them, if we find Sarah's child, we'll discover that Dad was right to love her, that she was everything you could never be, that his biggest mistake wasn't leaving her. It was choosing you." The slap came fast and sharp, cracking across Emma's cheek. The journal fell from her hands, hitting the floor with a thud. Catherine stood there, breathing hard, her hand still raised, shock and rage warring on her face. Neither of them had heard the door open, but Marcus stood there now, his eyes moving from his mother to his sister to the journal on the floor. "What the hell is going on?" Emma touched her cheek, feeling the sting, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. Catherine stepped back, composing herself, smoothing down her dress like nothing had happened. "Your sister was snooping through your father's private belongings. I was simply trying to protect his memory." Marcus looked between them, his business instincts clearly sensing something bigger at play. He walked into the room and picked up the journal. "What is this?" "It's nothing," Catherine said quickly. "Just old memories, not important." But Marcus was already flipping through pages, his eyes scanning the words. Emma watched his face change as he read. Confusion first, then shock, then something harder to read, something calculating. "There's another heir," he said flatly. "Dad had a kid before he married you." Catherine reached for the journal, but Marcus held it away. "Marcus, that child is a non-issue. There's no legal claim, no documentation. Your father's will is airtight." "Unless they have DNA," Marcus said slowly. "Unless they can prove paternity, then they have a case for a portion of the estate. Depending on state law, they could claim up to half." Emma saw the shift happen in real time. Her brother, who had seemed almost sympathetic a moment ago, was now doing math. Cold, hard calculations about money and inheritance and what a secret sibling could cost him. "We need to find them," Marcus said, "before they find us. If we can locate them first, we can offer a settlement, a payoff, something to make them go away quietly." "Or we could tell them the truth," Emma said. "We could give them what they deserve, a place in this family, answers about who their father was." Marcus looked at her like she was insane. "Are you serious? You want to give away half of Dad's fortune to some stranger because he wrote about knocking up his girlfriend 30 years ago? She's not a stranger. She's our sister, or brother. She's family." "She's a liability," Catherine said coldly. "And your brother is right. We find them first. We control the narrative. We protect what's ours." Emma looked at these two people, her family, and realized how alone she truly was. They didn't care about truth or justice or doing the right thing. They only cared about protecting their wealth, their status, their carefully constructed lives. "I won't help you," Emma said quietly. "I won't be part of whatever you're planning." Marcus shrugged. "We don't need your help. We have Dad's resources, his investigators, his lawyers. We'll find Sarah's kid, whether you cooperate or not." He started toward the door, the journal still in his hand. But Emma saw something on the desk. Something she had missed before. A business card tucked under the corner of the desk blotter, faded, old, but still readable. She grabbed it before either of them could stop her. The name on the card made her heart stop. Sarah Mitchell, attorney at law, family court specialist, Boston, Massachusetts. The address was handwritten on the back in her father's shaky script. Recent, maybe just weeks before he died. The address led to a small law office in South Boston, tucked between a bodega and a laundromat. Nothing like the gleaming towers where the Ashford family lawyers worked. This was the kind of place where real people came with real problems. Custody battles, divorce papers, immigration cases. The paint on the door was chipped, and the gold lettering that spelled out Sarah Mitchell's name was fading. Emma had driven through the night to get here. She didn't tell Marcus or Catherine she was leaving. She just packed a bag, took her car, and disappeared while they were still arguing about strategies and settlements downstairs. By the time they realized she was gone, she was already 3 states away. Now she sat in her rental car across the street, staring at that door, trying to find the courage to walk through it. The business card was clenched in her hand, the edges worn from where she had been gripping it for hours during the drive. Sarah Mitchell could be anyone. Maybe a cousin. Maybe just someone her father consulted about legal matters. Maybe the journal was wrong and there was no child at all. Maybe this whole trip was a waste of time, a wild chase after ghosts and old regrets. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her father had come here, that he had stood outside this very building in his final months, working up the courage to walk through that door just like she was doing now. She got out of the car. Her legs felt unsteady. The morning air was cold, sharp with the promise of winter. A few people passed by on the sidewalk, busy with their own lives, completely unaware that someone's entire world was about to change. The door wasn't locked. A small bell chimed when Emma pushed it open. Inside was a waiting room that had seen better days, chairs with worn fabric, magazines from 2 years ago, a receptionist desk that was currently empty. But there were signs of life. A coffee mug still steaming on the desk, a computer screen glowing. Someone was here. "Hello?" Emma called out, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet space. A door opened from the back office. A woman emerged, maybe in her early 50s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, glasses perched on her nose. She looked tired but kind, the way people look when they've spent years fighting battles for others. "I'm sorry, I was on a call." "Do you have an appointment?" The woman's voice was professional but warm. She moved toward the desk, reaching for what Emma assumed was an appointment book. "No, I don't. I'm looking for Sarah Mitchell. Is that you?" The woman paused, something shifting in her expression. Caution, maybe, or recognition. "I'm Sarah. Can I help you with something?" Emma's throat went dry. This was it. The moment that would either confirm everything or prove she had been chasing shadows. She held up the business card, her hand trembling slightly. "My father had your card. Richard Ashford. He died 2 weeks ago." The name hung in the air between them. Emma watched Sarah's face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any hint that this woman knew who Richard Ashford was, that maybe she was the Sarah from the journal, the one her father had loved and lost. But Sarah's expression showed only polite confusion. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't recognize that name." "Are you sure he consulted with me? I handle mostly family court cases, child custody, that sort of thing." The disappointment was crushing. Emma had been so sure. The address in her father's handwriting, the business card hidden in his desk. It had to mean something. "He wrote your address," Emma said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Just before he died. You have to remember him. Please." Sarah's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry. I really don't. But grief can make us see connections that aren't there. Maybe he wrote down my name for a friend, or maybe he confused me with someone else. It happens." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes. She had been so stupid, driven all this way, abandoned her family, chased after a ghost story written in an old journal. She turned toward the door, embarrassed, defeated. "Wait." Sarah's voice stopped her. "What did you say your father's name was?" "Richard Ashford." Sarah's face had gone pale. She moved around the desk, her hands gripping the edge like she needed support. "Richard Ashford? The Richard Ashford? The billionaire?" "Yes. And he had my business card?" "Hidden in his desk, with your address written on the back." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her mind clearly racing. When she spoke again, her voice was careful, measured. "Why are you here? What do you want from me? I need to know if you knew him, 32 years ago. If you were in a relationship with him. If you—" Emma couldn't finish the sentence. It felt too invasive, too presumptuous. But Sarah understood. Her eyes closed, and she took a deep breath, like she was bracing herself for something she had been avoiding for decades. "I think you should come into my office." The back room was small but organized, diplomas on the wall, photos of clients whose cases she had won. a bookshelf overflowing with law texts and case files. Sarah gestured for Emma to sit, then closed the door behind them. "That was my mother's name," Sarah said quietly. "Sarah Mitchell. She died when I was 5 years old, car accident. I took her name when I went to law school. Felt like a way to honor her memory." Emma's heart sank. Another dead end. But Sarah wasn't finished. "My mother lived here in Boston. She was a paralegal before she died, never married, raised me alone. I grew up not knowing who my father was. She never talked about him. I asked once when I was young, and she told me some people are better off as questions than answers." The words echoed what Emma had read in her father's journal, about Sarah disappearing, about no birth certificate, about a child that couldn't be found. "When I was 16, going through my mother's things, I found a box, hidden in the back of her closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to someone named Richard. She never sent them. Just wrote them and kept them like a diary of things she wanted to say but couldn't." Emma's hands were shaking now. "Do you still have them?" Sarah nodded slowly. She went to a filing cabinet in the corner, the kind with a lock on it. She pulled out a key from her desk drawer and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was an old shoebox held together with tape and time. She placed it on the desk between them. "I haven't looked at these in years. After I read them the first time, I put them away. It hurt too much. My mother loved someone who abandoned her, who chose money and power over her and me. I didn't want to carry that anger around, so I buried it." Emma reached for the box, but Sarah put her hand on top of it. "Before you open this, I need to know why you're here, what you want from me. Because if Richard Ashford was my father, if that's what you came here to tell me, then we have a problem. Because I want nothing from that family, nothing from that money. I've built a life that means something. I help people who actually need it. I don't need blood money from a man who chose not to be my father." The words were sharp but honest. Emma understood them, respected them even. "I'm not here to offer you money. I'm here because my father's last word before he died was your mother's name, because he spent 30 years regretting his choice. Because I think he tried to find you, and when he finally did, he didn't have the courage to knock on your door. And I think you deserve to know that he never stopped caring, that he died wishing he had been brave enough to choose differently." Sarah's eyes were wet now, though she was clearly fighting to maintain her composure. "That's supposed to make me feel better? That he regretted abandoning us? That doesn't change anything. My mother died believing she wasn't good enough, that his business deals and society wife were worth more than what they had together. Regret doesn't fix that." "You're right," Emma said softly. "It doesn't. But maybe the truth does. Maybe knowing who you really are, where you came from, gives you something my mother never had. Choice. You can decide what this means. You can decide if you want to be part of our family or if you want nothing to do with us. But you deserve to make that choice with all the information." Sarah stared at the box for a long time. Finally, she opened it. Inside were letters, just like she said. But underneath them was something else. A birth certificate, yellowed with age but still legible. Emma leaned forward to read it. Father, unknown. Mother, Sarah Jane Mitchell. Child, Sarah Christine Mitchell. Date of birth matched the timeline in her father's journal perfectly, but there was something else in the box, a photograph, faded and creased from being held too many times, a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile standing next to a man in a coffee shop. The man's face was turned away from the camera, but Emma recognized the watch on his wrist, her father's watch, the one he never took off, the one that was buried with him. "That's them," Sarah whispered. "That's my mother, and that's him." Emma pulled out her phone. She scrolled through photos until she found one from the funeral. Her father's face was visible in the casket, peaceful and still. She handed the phone to Sarah. Sarah looked at the photo for a long time, studying the features. The nose that matched hers, the shape of the eyes, the strong jaw. She was seeing her father's face for the first time in her life, and he was already gone. "I look like him," she said, her voice breaking. "I spent my whole life wondering, and I look just like him." Emma reached across the desk and took Sarah's hand. You do. And I think he knew that. I think that's why he came here. Why he stood outside your office but couldn't bring himself to come in. Because seeing you would make it real. Would force him to face what he had given up. Sarah pulled her hand away, anger flashing across her face. No. Don't make excuses for him. He was a coward. He made his choice 32 years ago, and he lived with it. He doesn't get forgiveness just because he had regrets at the end. I'm not asking you to forgive him, Emma said. I'm just asking you to know the truth. You have a family. Me, my brother Marcus. We're your family, whether you want us or not. Half family, Sarah corrected bitterly. Different mothers, different worlds, different everything. But same father, same blood, same loss. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. And there's something else you need to know. My father left a fortune, and legally you might have a claim to part of it. Sarah's expression hardened. I told you, I don't want his money. I know. But my brother and my stepmother don't believe that. They're looking for you right now. And when they find you, they're going to try to buy your silence, to make you sign away any rights you might have. I came here first because I wanted you to hear the truth from someone who actually cares about what's right, not just what's profitable. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing the small office. This is insane. Yesterday I was just a lawyer trying to help families stay together. Today, I'm the secret heir to a fortune I never wanted from a father I never knew. How is any of this real? I don't know, Emma admitted, but it is, and we have to figure out what to do next. Together. Sarah stopped pacing and looked at Emma with sharp, intelligent eyes. Why should I trust you? You're his legitimate daughter. You have everything to lose if I make a claim. Because, Emma said simply, I think the truth matters more than money. And I think you're my sister, and I've always wanted a sister. Sarah sat back down slowly, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. She was searching for something. Deception, maybe. Hidden motives. The kind of manipulation that comes naturally to people born into wealth. But Emma met her gaze steadily, openly, with nothing to hide. There's more, Sarah said finally. More you need to know before you decide I'm someone worth claiming as family. Emma waited, her stomach knotting with apprehension. Sarah opened a different drawer in her desk. This one held a manila folder, thick with documents. She pulled it out and set it on the desk between them, her hand resting on top, like she was still deciding whether to reveal its contents. 6 months ago, a man came to my office. Expensive suit, professional demeanor. Said he was a private investigator, hired by a client who wished to remain anonymous. He asked me questions about my mother, about my childhood, about whether I knew who my father was. I told him the same thing I told everyone. That my mother never revealed his identity and that I had stopped looking for answers years ago. Emma's blood ran cold. My father. He sent an investigator. That's what I thought too. At first. Sarah opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed a man in his 60s, grey hair, sharp features, standing outside Sarah's office building. But this wasn't your father. I pulled the security footage after he left because something felt wrong, threatening almost. I ran his face through some databases I have access to through my legal work. She slid another document across the desk. A background check, professional, thorough, the kind that costs serious money. His name is Thomas Brennan. He's worked for the same family for 30 years, not the Ashfords, the Worthingtons, Catherine's family. The words hit Emma like ice water. Catherine sent someone to find you, 6 months ago, before my father even died. It gets worse. Sarah pulled out more papers, bank statements, financial records. After that visit, I got paranoid, started digging into my own history, my mother's past, anything that might explain why someone was suddenly interested in me. I found something my mother had hidden, a safety deposit box I didn't know existed. She left instructions in her will that I could only access it when I turned 30. I turned 30 last month. Emma's mouth went dry. What was in it? Sarah's expression was hard now, all the earlier vulnerability replaced by something sharp and angry. Letters, not the ones in the shoebox, different ones. These were from Richard to my mother, written after I was born, dozens of them over the course of 5 years. He didn't abandon us completely, he sent money, a lot of it, enough that my mother never had to work if she didn't want to, enough to set up a trust fund for my education, my future, everything. That's good, Emma said, confused about why this revelation seemed to upset Sarah so much. It means he cared, that he tried to take care of you even if he couldn't be there. That's what I thought too. Sarah's voice was bitter. Until I read the last letter, the one that explained why the money stopped, why he suddenly disappeared from our lives completely when I was 5 years old. She pulled out a single piece of paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Richard's. Emma recognized it from the journal, but this was shakier, more desperate. Sarah read it aloud, her voice steady but cold. Sarah, this is the last time I can write to you. Catherine knows. I don't know how, but she found out about the money, about the letters, about everything. She's given me an ultimatum. If I continue any contact with you or our daughter, she will destroy me. Her family has the power to do it. They can pull their investments, tank my companies, ruin everything I've built. But more than that, she threatened you, said accidents happen, said women and children disappear in cities like Boston every day. I can't risk it. I can't risk you or Sarah Christine. So this is goodbye. I'm setting up one final payment, enough to take care of both of you for life. But after this, I can never contact you again. Please know that I love you, that I always will, but I'm too much of a coward to protect you any other way. Forgive me. The silence in the office was deafening. Emma felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath her. Catherine, her stepmother, the woman who had raised her, who had played the role of devoted wife for 3 decades, she had threatened to kill a woman and child to keep Richard in line. That letter is dated 2 weeks before my mother's car accident, Sarah said quietly. Single vehicle collision. She lost control on a wet road late at night. The police ruled it an accident. No investigation. Case closed. You think Catherine had her killed? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I think my mother received a massive payment and suddenly decided to drive across town late at night in a rainstorm to visit a friend she hadn't seen in months. I think the brake lines on her car were never examined. I think a 28-year-old woman with no history of reckless driving suddenly lost control for no apparent reason. And I think the timing is awfully convenient. Emma's mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. Catherine was cold, calculating, ruthless in business. But murder of an innocent woman, of the mother of a small child. You have no proof, Emma said, but even as she said it, she knew it sounded hollow. No, I don't. Just like I have no proof that Richard Ashford was my father. Just letters and photographs and a birth certificate that lists father as unknown. Everything is plausibly deniable. That's how people like your family operate. Clean hands, clean conscience. Let other people do the dirty work. She's not my family, Emma said fiercely. If what you're saying is true, if she did this, then she's a monster. She's still your stepmother, still the woman who raised you, still the person who will inherit half of everything now that Richard is dead, unless, of course, there's another heir who can challenge the will. The implications crashed over Emma like a wave. That's why she sent the investigator. She wanted to know if you existed. If you knew who your father was, if you were a threat. And now she knows I am. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. Your brother has the journal now. He knows about me. It's only a matter of time before they figure out who I am and where to find me. When they do, they're going to come with lawyers and contracts and threats. They're going to try to make me disappear one way or another. Then we go public, Emma said, standing up too. We tell the truth. We expose what Catherine did. We get justice for your mother. Sarah turned to look at her, and there was something almost pitying in her expression. Justice? Emma, we have no evidence, no witnesses, no case. All we have is a 30-year-old letter from a dead man making vague threats that could mean anything. No prosecutor would touch this, and even if they did, the Worthington family has enough money and influence to bury it. You know that. So what do we do? Just let her get away with it? No. Sarah's voice was steel. We make her think she's won. We let her believe I'm willing to take a settlement and disappear. We draw her out, make her feel safe, and then we find the proof we need." Emma stared at her half-sister, seeing her clearly for the first time. Sarah wasn't just a lawyer who helped families. She was a fighter, someone who had survived losing her mother, growing up without a father, building a life from nothing. Someone who knew how to play the long game. "You've been planning this," Emma said slowly. "Since you found the letters, since you figured out what really happened. That's why you stayed here, why you kept the same name. You wanted her to find you." "I wanted answers," Sarah corrected. "I wanted to look the woman in the eye who took my mother from me and see if she would blink. But I couldn't make the first move. I had to wait. And then your father died and you showed up at my door, and suddenly I have an ally inside the family, someone Catherine doesn't completely control yet. You want to use me." There was no accusation in Emma's voice, just understanding. "I want us to use each other," Sarah said. "You want the truth about your family, about who they really are. I want justice for my mother. We both want to stop Catherine from winning, from keeping all that blood money while pretending to be the grieving widow. So we work together. You go back home, you play the dutiful daughter, you watch and listen and report back. And when the time is right, when we have what we need, we take her down." It was crazy, dangerous. Emma could lose everything, her inheritance, her family. Maybe even her life if Sarah was right about how far Catherine was willing to go. But the alternative was going back to that house and pretending she didn't know. Living with a woman who might be a murderer. Letting her father's real love story die in silence. Letting Sarah stay buried as a secret that was never meant to be revealed. "Okay," Emma said. "I'm in. But I need something from you first. I need you to tell me the truth. Do you want the money? Any of it? Or is this really just about your mother?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she answered, her voice was raw, honest. "I don't want his money, but I want him to be acknowledged as my father. I want it on record. I want the world to know that Sarah Mitchell mattered, that she wasn't just some secret shame he paid off and forgot about, that she was real, that I'm real, that we deserved better than we got." Emma crossed the room and pulled Sarah into a hug. Sarah stiffened at first, unused to physical affection, unused to trust. But then she hugged back, and Emma felt her half-sister's body shake with silent tears she had probably been holding in for decades. "We'll make them acknowledge it," Emma promised. "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth about her, about you, about all of it." They pulled apart, both wiping their eyes, both trying to compose themselves. Sarah managed a small, sad smile. "You should probably know, in case you're having second thoughts about the whole sister thing, I'm not a very good person. I've spent the last month planning revenge against people I've never met. I've imagined 100 different ways to hurt Catherine the way she hurt my mother. Some of those thoughts were pretty dark." "Good," Emma said, "because Catherine isn't going to go down easy. We're going to need someone who knows how to fight dirty. Someone who has nothing to lose. That's you." Sarah nodded. "And we're going to need someone on the inside. Someone who can move through that world without raising suspicion. Someone Catherine thinks she still controls. That's you." "Partners, then." "Sisters," Sarah corrected. Then she paused, a new thought occurring to her. "There's one more thing. Something I found in my mother's papers that I haven't told you yet. I don't know what it means, but I think it's important." She went back to the manila folder and pulled out a photograph. It was older than the others. The colors faded to sepia tones. It showed two young women, arms around each other, laughing at the camera. One was clearly Sarah's mother. Young, beautiful, full of life. The other took Emma a moment to recognize because she looked so different, softer, happier, real. It was Catherine, before she became Mrs. Richard Ashford, before the masks and the coldness, when she was just a young woman with a friend. "They knew each other," Sarah said quietly. "My mother and Catherine. They were friends before any of this happened. Close friends based on what I found, letters between them, photos from college. They were roommates at Wellesley." Emma's blood turned to ice. "Catherine knew your mother before she married my father?" "Not just before. She introduced them. There's a letter where my mother talks about it, about how her friend Catherine set her up on a blind date with this ambitious young man from Brooklyn, about how it was the best thing anyone had ever done for her, about how she was falling in love. The pieces were falling into place now. A picture so ugly Emma didn't want to see it fully formed, but she couldn't look away. Catherine introduced your mother to my father. She watched them fall in love. And then she married him herself and threatened your mother to stay away. She didn't just steal him, she planned it, all of it. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. The question is why? Why would she destroy her best friend? Why would she orchestrate all of this? What could possibly be worth that level of betrayal? Emma thought about the woman she knew. The cold, calculating Catherine who measured everything in terms of power and position. Who had spent 30 years playing a role without ever breaking character. Revenge, Emma said slowly. She's punishing him. Punishing my father for something. She trapped him in a loveless marriage. Made him watch her play the perfect wife, while knowing she had destroyed the woman he actually loved. That's not about money or status. That's about making someone suffer. But what did he do to her? What could warrant 30 years of calculated cruelty? Neither of them had an answer, but Emma knew where they might find one, back at the Ashford estate, in her father's study, in the files and papers and secrets that Catherine thought she had hidden so well. I need to go back, Emma said. Before they realize I'm gone and start asking questions, before Catherine has time to prepare for whatever she thinks is coming next. Be careful, Sarah warned. If she figured out you took that business card, she'll know you found me. She'll be watching you now closely. Let her watch. She has no idea what we're planning, and by the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. Emma headed for the door, then paused and looked back. Sarah, thank you. For trusting me. For giving me a chance to do the right thing. Don't thank me yet, Sarah said. We haven't won, and people like Catherine don't lose gracefully. This is going to get ugly. I know. But at least we'll face it together. As sisters. Emma left the office and walked back to her car. The sun was setting now, painting the Boston sky in shades of orange and red. Like fire. Like warning. She had a 12-hour drive ahead of her to get back home. 12 hours to figure out her next move. 12 hours to prepare for the war that was coming. Because that's what this was now. War. And only one side could win. Emma drove through the night, her mind racing faster than the highway miles disappearing beneath her wheels. She arrived at the Ashford estate just before dawn, the massive house looming dark against the lightening sky. Most of the windows were still black, the family sleeping off another day of pretending everything was normal. She parked around back, near the service entrance, hoping to slip in unnoticed. But when she opened the door to the kitchen, Catherine was sitting at the table in her silk robe, a cup of coffee steaming in front of her. She didn't look surprised to see Emma. She looked like she had been waiting. Long drive from Boston, Catherine said calmly, taking a sip of her coffee. You must be exhausted. Emma's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence. Catherine set down her cup with deliberate precision. You took the business card from your father's desk. You disappeared for 18 hours. Where else would you go? The question isn't whether you found her. The question is what she told you and what you plan to do about it. There was no point in lying anymore. Emma pulled out a chair and sat down across from her stepmother. Two women at a kitchen table in the early morning light, about to decide each other's fates. She told me everything, Emma said. About the letters, about the threats, about how you introduced my father to the woman he actually loved and then destroyed her so you could have him instead. About how her mother died in a very convenient accident right after your ultimatum. So yes, Catherine, I know exactly who you are. Catherine's expression didn't change. No shock, no denial, no guilt. Just that same cold calculation Emma had seen her entire life. And what do you think you know? That I'm some villain from a storybook? That I murdered a woman out of jealousy? You sound like a child making up fairy tales. Then tell me the truth, Emma challenged. Tell me why you did it, because Sarah's right. This wasn't about money or status. You already had both. This was personal. This was revenge. So what did my father do to you that was worth 30 years of making him suffer? For the first time, something cracked in Catherine's facade. A flash of old pain, old rage, carefully buried, but never quite dead. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens her money had created. Your father didn't do anything to me, she said finally, her voice softer than Emma had ever heard it. I did it to myself. I fell in love with a man who saw me as nothing more than a useful connection, a business arrangement. Sarah Mitchell was my best friend, my roommate, my sister in every way that mattered, and I introduced her to Richard because I thought she deserved someone brilliant and ambitious, someone who would appreciate her the way no one ever appreciated me. Emma stayed silent, sensing that Catherine was finally, after all these years, telling the truth. They fell in love instantly. The kind of love people write songs about, the kind I had dreamed of my whole life but never found, and I was happy for her. I truly was. Until I realized that what they had together was everything I had always wanted and would never have. Richard looked at Sarah the way men had never looked at me, like she was magic, like she was enough just by existing. Catherine's hands gripped the window frame, her knuckles white. When Richard's company started failing, when he came to me desperate for help, I saw an opportunity. My family could save him, could give him everything he needed to build his empire. But the price was marriage, not to the woman he loved, to me, the convenient choice, the strategic choice. And I told myself it was practical, that love was overrated, that power and partnership were what really mattered. But you were lying to yourself, Emma said quietly. I was lying to everyone, to Richard, to Sarah, to myself. I thought if I could just have him, even if he didn't love me, it would be enough, that I could make him forget her, that eventually he would see I was the better choice. But 30 years later, with his dying breath, he proved me wrong. He said her name, not mine, never mine, even after everything I gave him, even after everything I sacrificed. You didn't sacrifice, Emma said, her voice hard now. You stole. You threatened. You destroyed. And if Sarah's right about the accident, you murdered. Catherine turned from the window and her face was terrible, not with guilt, with defiance. I protected what was mine. Sarah Mitchell made her choice when she tried to keep Richard's baby as leverage, when she thought she could use that child to bring him back. I gave her money, more money than she could spend in a lifetime. All she had to do was disappear, take the child and build a new life far away from us. But she stayed in Boston, stayed close, like she was waiting for him to change his mind. So you killed her. I protected my family. Catherine's voice was steel. I protected my marriage. I protected the empire we built together. One woman's life against everything we had created. That's not murder, that's mathematics. Emma felt sick. She had known the truth in her heart. But hearing Catherine admit it so casually, so coldly, was something else entirely. You're a monster. I'm a survivor. Catherine moved closer, and there was something predatory in her movements now. And you need to decide right now what you are. Are you going to run to the police with accusations you can't prove? Are you going to try to give Sarah Mitchell's daughter everything we've worked for? Or are you going to be smart? Smart how? Sarah Christine wants acknowledgement. She wants the world to know she's Richard's daughter. Fine. We can give her that. A DNA test. Public acknowledgement. A seat at the table. But the money stays in the family, the real family, Marcus and you. We offer her a token settlement. Enough to feel generous, not enough to matter. And in exchange, she signs away any claims to the estate and promises to never speak about the past, about her mother, about me, about any of this. Emma stared at this woman, amazed at her audacity. You think Sarah will agree to that, after everything you took from her? I think Sarah is a smart woman who knows that fighting us in court will cost her everything and gain her nothing. We have the best lawyers money can buy. We can tie her up in litigation for years, decades. She'll die before she sees a penny. Or she can take the deal, get what she says she wants, and move on with her life. And if she refuses? Catherine's smile was cold. Then accidents happen. History repeats itself. I've protected this family for 30 years. I won't stop now. The threat was clear, explicit. Catherine had just confessed to one murder and threatened another, and she didn't care that Emma knew because she didn't believe Emma would do anything about it. Emma stood up slowly, every muscle in her body tense. You're right about one thing. I do need to decide who I am, and I'm not going to be someone who lets you get away with this. She pulled out her phone. The screen was lit up, showing an active call, Sarah's name at the top, the call duration showing 23 minutes and counting. Catherine's face went pale. What have you done? I've done what my father should have done 32 years ago. I chose the right side. Emma ended the call and put the phone away. Sarah heard everything, every confession, every threat, every word. That's not admissible in court. Single-party consent doesn't apply across state lines. Any lawyer will tell you that recording is worthless. Maybe legally, but not in the court of public opinion. Sarah's already sent copies to 3 major news outlets, the family attorneys, the board members of every company my father controlled. By the time the sun comes up, everyone will know what you did, what you are. No amount of money can buy back your reputation once that story breaks. Catherine lunged forward, reaching for Emma's phone, but Emma stepped back. It's too late. It's done. You've lost. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his phone in his hand, his face white with shock. Mother, what the hell have you done? The lawyers are already calling. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. There are reporters camped outside the gates. This is everywhere. Catherine looked between her son and stepdaughter, and for the first time in 30 years, her mask completely shattered. What lay beneath was uglier than Emma had imagined. Not regret, not remorse, just fury at being caught, at losing control. Fix this, Catherine said to Marcus, her voice sharp. Use your connections. Pay whoever you need to pay. Make this go away. But Marcus was already backing away, shaking his head. I can't fix this. You confessed to murder, Mother. You threatened another woman's life. Even if the recording isn't admissible, the optics are catastrophic. The stock prices are already dropping. Partners are pulling out. This isn't just a scandal, this is the end of everything. Then we deny everything. We say the recording was faked. We destroy Sarah Mitchell's credibility. We fight. No. Emma's voice was firm, final. You're done fighting. You're done destroying people. This ends now. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder. Someone, probably Sarah, had sent the recording to the police too. Catherine heard them, and something in her posture changed, deflated, like a puppet with its strings cut. All of this, she said quietly, looking at Emma, all of this because your father couldn't love me, because even at the end, even after everything I gave him, he still chose her, still whispered her name instead of mine. Emma felt an unexpected wave of sadness for this woman. Not forgiveness, never forgiveness, but understanding maybe. Of what 30 years of living a lie could do to a person. Of how love, when twisted by jealousy and pride, could turn into something monstrous. He couldn't love you because you never let him see who you really were, Emma said. You spent so much time playing a role, being what you thought he needed, that there was nothing real left to love. Sarah's mother showed him the truth, all of it, the good and the bad. That's what he fell in love with. Not a performance, not a strategy. Just real, messy, human truth. The police cars pulled up outside. Car doors slammed, official voices called out. Marcus opened the front door, letting them in, cooperating fully because he was smart enough to know when to cut losses. Catherine didn't resist when they read her rights, didn't cry or plead or bargain. She just stood there, silent and cold, as they led her out in handcuffs. The perfect posture she had maintained for decades finally broke as they put her in the back of the police car. She looked small suddenly, human, defeated. Emma watched them drive away, then sat down on the front steps of the house she had grown up in. The house that had never really been a home, just a museum of wealth and secrets and carefully constructed lies. Her phone rang, Sarah's name on the screen. It's done, Emma said when she answered. I know. I've been watching the news. Sarah's voice was shaking. I can't believe it actually worked. I can't believe she just confessed everything. She was arrogant, thought she was untouchable. That's always how people like her fall. They forget that everyone is touchable eventually. There was a long pause. Then Sarah said quietly, My mother. She'll finally have justice. After all these years. Yes, she will. Emma looked up at the sky, now fully light. A new day beginning. What happens now? What do you want to do about the estate, the money, all of it? I meant what I said. I don't want his money, but I want his name. I want the world to know that Sarah Mitchell mattered, that I'm his daughter, that we existed and we deserved better. Can you help me with that? I can. We'll set up a DNA test, make it official. Your name will be in the will, in the records, in the family history. Sarah Christine Mitchell Ashford, my sister. She could hear Sarah crying softly on the other end of the line. Thank you for believing me, for risking everything to do the right thing. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Because that's what family does. Real family, not the kind built on contracts and convenience. The kind built on truth and choice. You're my sister because I choose you to be. And I think our father, wherever he is, would be glad we found each other. They talked for a few more minutes, making plans for when Sarah would come to town, how they would handle the media, what would happen to the estate now that Catherine was facing murder charges. It was complicated and messy and would take years to fully sort out. But they had time now, time and truth and each other. When Emma finally hung up, Marcus came out and sat down next to her on the steps. You destroyed our family, he said. But there was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. No. I exposed what was always broken. There's a difference. Emma looked at her brother. You can hate me if you want. I'll understand. But I won't apologize for choosing the truth. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't hate you. I'm angry. I'm terrified about what happens next. But I don't hate you. And I think maybe, if I'm really honest with myself, I'm glad someone finally had the courage to stop pretending everything was fine when it never was. Emma reached over and took his hand. He didn't pull away. They sat there together as the sun rose higher. Journalists gathered at the gates, and their carefully constructed world crumbled around them. But in the ruins, there was something new growing, something real, truth, justice, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could build something better from what was left. 3 months later, Emma and Sarah stood together in a cemetery. They were placing flowers on 2 graves. One was Richard Ashford's, fresh dirt still settling. The other was Sarah Jane Mitchell's, decades old, weathered, but finally receiving the attention and honor it deserved. Do you think he's sorry? Sarah asked, looking at Richard's headstone. Wherever he is, do you think he regrets his choices? I think he spent 30 years regretting them, Emma said. But regret doesn't change the past. It just haunts it. What matters is what we do now, how we honor the people who deserved better. How we make sure their stories don't die as secrets. Sarah nodded and placed her flowers carefully on her mother's grave. She would have liked you, my mother. She would have been glad we found each other. I think our father would be too, even if he didn't deserve to be. They stood there in silence for a while, 2 sisters who shouldn't exist according to the world's rules, but did anyway. Living proof that truth always finds a way out eventually, that secrets can't stay buried forever. That love, even when it's messy and broken and 30 years too late, still matters. As they walked back to the car, Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. The DNA results are official. Welcome to the family, Sarah. Let's have dinner next week and figure out what comes next. Sarah read over Emma's shoulder and smiled, a real smile. The first one Emma had seen from her that wasn't tinged with sadness or rage. What comes next? Sarah repeated. I like the sound of that. Forward instead of backward, future instead of past. But never forgetting, Emma added, never pretending it didn't happen. We carry their stories with us, your mother's, our father's, even Catherine's, because that's how we make sure it means something. That's how we make sure it wasn't all for nothing. They got in the car and drove away from the cemetery, leaving behind the graves and the ghosts and the secrets that had finally been exposed to light. The road ahead was uncertain. Catherine's trial would be long and public. The family fortune would be divided and redivided. The Ashford name would never mean the same thing it once did. But Emma and Sarah had each other now. They had truth, they had justice, and they had the freedom that comes from no longer living in the shadows of other people's lies. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. Sometimes losing everything is how you find out what really matters. And sometimes, just sometimes, saying one name with your dying breath can change everything for the people left behind. Before his heart stopped, Richard Ashford whispered just one name. Not the name of the woman he married. Not the names of the children who stood at his bedside. Just one name. Sarah. And in that single word, he told the truth he had been too afraid to speak for 30 years. That love matters. That choices have consequences. That some regrets echo long after we're gone. But he also gave his daughters a gift. A mystery that brought them together. A truth that set them free. A chance to build something real from the ruins of his lies. And maybe in the end, that was his final act of redemption. Not the wealth he left behind. Not the empire he built. But the two women who found each other because of his last whispered word. Two sisters who chose each other, chose truth, chose justice over comfort and convenience. That's the real inheritance. Not money, not power. But the courage to face the truth and the strength to build something better from it. If you've been carrying secrets that are too heavy to hold alone, share your story in the comments. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak the truth out loud. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Because everyone deserves to have their story heard. Everyone deserves to be more than a whispered name at the end of someone else's life. You matter. Your truth matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.